Deleted Session, February 4, 1981. Now, I will end up covering all of the areas you discussed this afternoon, of course, in my own fashion. We will call this discussion 1. There is some difference, of course, in Ruber's mind between his attitude toward his books and mine. To some extent, this is more than understandable. He would, had I not emerged, written books of his own in any case. He would have encountered no unusual obstacles as far as his public stance was concerned. In that he would have felt the rather characteristic dilemma of some creative writers, who must assimilate the private and public portions of their experiences. He would have had no unusual difficulty, however, in, say, standing up for his own ideas, holding his own, so to speak, in any arguments or philosophies. He would have been in that case operating himself within the recognizable framework of psychological identity, being himself within the context of personality structure as it would be defined by all. He feels quite competent with his own books. They begin by giving some verbal tribute to old definitions, and then take off from there, having firmly established the fact that he is more or less in the same kettle of fish. In that regard, there is little ambiguity. Now, my books do not pretend to even accept those conventions, but start out from a different viewpoint entirely. That viewpoint alone makes a difference. That viewpoint alone establishes a different kind of pattern. It assumes to know. It speaks of knowledge that is self-evident from my point of view. It offers no apologies for itself. It presupposes a vaster structure of personality and identity, period. Ruber is very highly gifted, extraordinarily so in many respects. The nature of his gift, generally speaking, however, presupposes or implies the existence of vast riches in the psyche, riches that if, unwisely compared to the usual portions of the self, can seem to leave the usual self in a position of inferiority by contrast. The books that I have written are excellent conveyors, not only of content, but of essence. In a fashion, as far as the psyche is concerned, they come from a portion that is indeed immersed in knowledge that is self-evident. If I were only a portion of Ruber's larger psyche, then I would be the portion that knows what it knows, the portion that is concerned with spontaneous knowledge. Now, your social systems have very few frameworks that even take such experiences into consideration. There are the esoteric schools, for example, the spiritualistic societies, the Eastern traditions. Overall, they involve a very small esoteric group. The mainspring of society becomes touched by such groups now and then, but in the world of, say, the usual public encounter, there are no accepted frameworks for such experiences. You have first of all to explain your definition of personality, to attempt redefinitions of a very emotional kind. For when you are speaking of, say, space and time, that is one thing. When you are asking people to re-examine the whole matter of personal identity, you are setting conditions that may frighten many of them. Ruber feels that he could, for example, explain any of his own books from his own framework quite well. To explain my books is something else again, and in that manner of speaking, my books are self-evident also. Give us a moment. There are few people in such a position. He is not cowardly in that regard. He was, in fact, quite daring in refusing to accept the conventional spirit guide dogma, which would at least have given him a kind of psychological covering. He is appalled with the way that many people interpret my material. Sometimes it seems he would prefer even a smaller but more selective group of readers who were top in their fields, or who in one fashion or another earned his respect. The point is that our books reach all kinds of readers in all walks of life. That is because all kinds of people are innately acquainted with the nature of self-evident knowledge. They may misinterpret its nature, project it outside of themselves, turn it into a hobby, a chore, a religion, an art, a rigorous set of laws. But reading my books, they recognize the authority of the inner psyche. Ruber and you live in a world with its own cultural taboos, its own assumptions. The idea of personhood is a highly vital one, uniting peoples and societies. The idea of personhood held by the Roman Catholic Church affected the history of the world for centuries, and that idea of personhood is intimately involved, of course, with the idea of personhood's source. Now, Ruber understood quite well, in a fashion, that his own experiences were taking him outside of that cohesive framework, not simply outside of sciences or religion's dictates, but outside of those areas that science and religion ignored, deplored, or denied. In that regard, he felt that he was violating an important cultural taboo and embarked upon a program that would necessitate caution, self-protection, and a certain detachment. He was determined to go ahead, because his own value fulfillment sought those directions. Such was his nature. My published works, however, presented him with what he felt to be a public stance in a different fashion than his own would. My books automatically seemed to suggest a framework of reference to which few others could have access. Again, definitions of personality are important there. Ruber could read poetry without first having to define the nature of a point. He could meet any criticisms with suitable explanations. Since any audience was not about to question the point's psychological validity, any arguments would take place within an implied framework of definitions. Before even hearing the poetry, no such audience, Ruber felt, would question the fact of poetry itself, its techniques, traditions, or value. My books, however, by their very existence, appear in a world that largely does not concern itself with anything but the most surface elements of psychological reality. The matter of duplicity almost immediately arises. Ruber feels the existence of innumerable barriers in that regard, having, he feels, to fend with the questions that ensue. I must be as this, true or false, fiction or non-fiction, personality essence, spirit, if you prefer, or Ruber's own psyche in definitions usually accepted, playing at best a dubious role. And to a large degree, those questions would be there even if our material quite agreed with the established knowledge of your world. But it does not. It contradicts much of the world's knowledge. If Ruber wants to disagree with the world's knowledge, he feels that it is his right, and again would defend such ideas of forthrightly. They would be based upon experiences that are his own, many that you have shared as a result of your own personal experiences together. But Ruber is not aware of my subjective experience. My self-evident knowledge counts even if I were no more again than a part of his larger psyche, from riches that would be inaccessible in those terms to him. That is, in those terms, I would be delivering self-evident knowledge to him, revealing it, delivering it. I could not hand over the psychological quality of self-evident knowing, however. In that regard, he does not have the same kind of inner experience with which to back up my words. To some extent, he lacks the kind of faith in people that I have, because of the belief systems that surround you. It bothers him that some people, he thinks, consider that our books make up another Bible or is equivalent, and it seems to him that their lack of understanding in that regard hampers his own creativity. His attitude can hamper his creativity. Theirs, of course, cannot. The success of the books brings such questions into prominence. Of course, and I will discuss more of those allied concerns. Give us a moment. The books themselves, mine as well as his, are themselves indications of achievements that are not easily broken off, since they represent the natural creative development of his own abilities and growth. They also provide, if you realize it, the solutions to your dilemmas, as I hope you shall shortly see. That is, they provide you with that larger framework of understanding. For the old frameworks of understanding force you to continue to explore your reality for larger definitions. In those areas of concern, then Ruber is still involved with too small definitions. I will have far more to say, but that is enough for discussion 1. I know that it is difficult to understand, but the challenge is one of growth, one that exists in a fashion because you have moved into an ever-expanding framework, but in an uneven course. In larger fashions, you have made no grievous errors. That will become clear as we proceed with this discussion and of session. Ross said, "Thank you, Seth." She said, "A fun good evening. This should help relieve some of Ruber's stress. Read the session, of course, together. I will also give some pertinent comments more specifically, involving interviews, television, classes, and so forth." Ross said, "Thank you."